Just because some people believe demons aren't real, the devil isn't real, or heaven and hell aren't real doesn't make any of it untrue. In fact, the devil loves when people hold that belief. It gives him free rein to operate behind the scenes however he wants.
So I was a channeler. I talked to the demons, and they relayed messages to the rest of the cult through me. And their goal was really just to cause chaos. But later on, I was 16 when, I'm just gonna say it, I met Satan himself, which really obviously is shocking. And his priority for us, it changed the trajectory of the cult, and we started attacking just Christians, going after clergy specifically. We had names, addresses, workplaces, and that's what we did. We just harassed Christians. I would actually travel in the spirit, astral projection, to influence, I don't know, lust or something on a Christian. And in the spirit, I would see like a dome, like a blue dome, over groups of Christians that were praying, or just through all those experiences, I connected that we could not attack Christians as they were actively praying protection from God. Like, there was a no-go zone. Just absolutely no power.
I always love sharing this particular testimony, what this former atheist went through that completely changed his view. And it doesn't matter if you believe the spiritual realm is real or not. It is real, whether you accept it or not. Denying it just leaves you wide open and vulnerable to the enemy.
I had no belief in these kind of spiritual things. Every once in a while, my grandma would let us sleep at her house. We went to my grandma's house and we were sleeping in a spare room. And I remember she was brushing her teeth in the bathroom, and I was laying in bed watching something on TV or something. And I just heard this thud in the bathroom, and I went out to the bathroom, and she was like having a seizure. And she was like shaking and stuff like that. And, I grabbed her and I was holding her and I was trying to make sure she was okay, and pulled her out of it and took her back into the spare room we were sitting in. And I sat her down in this chair. And she was kind of coming to, but she was a little disoriented. Like, she was like, what happened? Kind of shook up a little bit, like wondering where she was at. I remember she looked outside the window, and she was looking outside the window, and she said, who's that? And we were on the second story of a house, right? So it's like, who you talking about outside the window? I was like, there's nobody, you just had a seizure. Everything's okay though. We're okay. Don't worry. And she was like, no, there's somebody standing outside. I can see them standing outside in the yard, because you could see the yard from where the window was, right? And it's weird that I wasn't more freaked out than I was, but I looked out the window, there's nobody there. As time went on, the seizures, they did happen more and more. And every time she would have a seizure, she would talk about seeing this guy. But one of the threads that started to appear after each one, we're talking maybe once every few weeks to once a week to sometimes multiple back to back, and then nothing for a while, was that the man was getting closer. Like, he was way out in the back of the yard, right? Outside the window, out back or whatever. And then like each time she would say, okay, like, he's closer, he's getting closer, he's getting closer. And she would kind of be coming out, and it was like, she was like delirious, right? Like, she would be half in a dream, half out of a dream, coming out of these seizures. And she would be like, he's coming, like saying things like that, right? Eventually, over time, it got to the point where he's in the room, he's right behind you, he's right next to you, he's right next to me, he's right here. Don't you see him? He's sitting right here. And I didn't think anything, it didn't bother me one bit. I thought it could be explained. It's like she has a tumor in her head. She's hallucinating. This is schizophrenia or something, right? Like, this is some type of hallucination. This is a side effect of that. This is not real. It's not real. That's what I kept telling myself. She kept saying he's getting closer, he's getting closer. And then the narrative changed from he's getting closer to he's trying to get in. She would have seizures, but she would be like hitting her head, like, and just saying, like, he's trying to get in, he's trying to get in, he's trying to get in. And I'd like hold her hand down, So she would like stop hitting herself, and be like, okay, relax. There's nobody trying to get in your head. And I remember the day one time when she kind of stopped fighting, and she said he got in. And I remember when that happened, like, the seizure stopped. like he like stopped like struggling a lot. I remember like the look in her eyes changed. Like just as I'm sitting here talking to you and then you're sitting here talking to me, you can see my body, right? Like you can see my eyes and all these things, but just this flicker happened. It was like a flicker. And I could just tell that although I was looking at the same body and the same person on the outside, the person on the inside was not the same. Like, I don't really know how to explain it other than the air in the room felt tight. Very like the vibe shifted very. And she looked at me straight in the eyes and just like this grin like came up on her face. She like smiled at me and I was like, Kay, like, are you okay? Are you done? What's going on? Do you feel better? And she got up for a second and like I went back and it's kind of like, it was weird. It was like looking around, kind of like checking the room out and stuff, like looking at her hands, kind of like checking things out, and then looked at me and like smelled me, when like smelled, and then like looked me straight in the eyes, like they were like looking through my eyes, and she was like, why are you so scared? I can smell the fear on you. Like, and I'm like, she does not talk like that, like her mannerisms of her voice, like she kind of had a bit of a southern drawl, like a bit of a city talk, southern drawl type way that she spoke. And suddenly it just became very like well-spoken, right? Very proper grammar, big words that she would never really use, looked at me and she's like, you smell like fear, and like smiled at me. There was something deep down in my spirit at this time, which I didn't even believe in yet, that just told me that what I was experiencing was like what all the horror movies were about, like Exorcist. You see these types of things, right? And I was just thinking like, there's no way that's not real. Like, it's not real. This isn't happening. Like, this is something else. But I remember it somewhere deep down in me. I was like, that's exactly what's happening right now. I remember having some type of morbid fascination with the experience. I would try and have conversations with it. Like the first time it happened, like the first time, back to what we were just talking about, and I smelled like fear, and I was like, who are you? It didn't say anything to me. And I was like, what do you want? Where are you from? Didn't say anything, which kind of like mocked me a little bit, joke with me. But that experience like ended, right? And she came back too, and she didn't really like know what had happened, right? And time went on, and like it didn't happen again for a little while. It started to happen that every time she would have a seizure, the guy would come back. Like it would be like this violent, like she would have this violent episode, and then like she would snap out of the episode and like it wouldn't be her. It would be like this entity, right? And it got to the point where it started to happen with such increasing frequency where I was sort of unfazed by it. The entity would come in to her body and I would be like, hey, what's going on, man? Welcome back. Yeah, it's still me. I'm not scared of you. But and I remember talking to it, I would ask it like, who are you? Where are you from? And I remember this moment clearly. It was a long time ago. I don't remember every word that he said to me, but I remember this moment very clearly where he just looked at me and says, you know who I am, you know what I am, that type of thing. And like in my head, I was just thinking demon, demon. I had no frame of reference for what a demon was. I was not raised in any way to believe it. And I was thinking to myself at the time, like, you're talking to a real demon right now, or you could be. Or you're talking to a split personality of some kind that's caused by a brain tumor. I wasn't afraid of it. And I think that's because I was in such darkness myself and I had no belief in a higher power. And the fact that I started to doubt my own story I was telling myself about it being some type of rational explanation, because if it was simply a hallucination of her mind, it wouldn't have this recurring theme that would continually be touched on and built upon like a continuous narrative. Like if every time it happened, it was something different, like, oh, I'm a milkman. Oh, I'm a dragon. Oh, blah, blah, blah. Like, okay, well, then you've lost your mind. But there was a continuity to it. The continuity is strange and the feeling is strange. And the way she's talking, it's all just so odd. Like I started to really doubt my own sanity, obviously, obviously. Like I need to know, and I remember I was like, listen, if you are what you say you are, and what you're telling me is true, then you need to reveal yourself to me and show me that you're real. Because right now, I think that you're just a fractured, a part piece of somebody else's imagination. Like you're a byproduct of a mental illness, you know? And the part where it really started to become real was that moment when I said, you need to show me that you're real. And I remember that night I was laying in bed and she was next to me. It was the middle of the night and I had never gotten sleep paralysis in my life and I've never gotten it since. This is the only time in my life anything like that has ever happened. But I remember like waking up in the middle of the night and just feeling like I was stuck to the bed, like fully conscious, but my body was totally asleep. There was a window, you know, to the right of us, with the blinds kind of partially opened. I could see this dark figure, like very slowly, like I could see the shadow out of the corner of my eye through the blinds, you know, like walking down the way. And I remember Kay was laying next to me and she was shaking me. She's like, you gotta wake up. You gotta wake up. Somebody's trying to get in. You got to wake up. But I couldn't move, right? So I'm sitting there like trying to talk. The figure like came on and she was like trying to shake me to wake me up, you know, which is weird thinking about it too. Cause like if I'm having sleep paralysis, how can she see that? If it's just sleep paralysis, how can she see that too? How can we both, and she's awake and I'm paralyzed? Like, how is that possible? And I remember the being came by the window and it just slipped like right through the door. Like this tall, dark shadow just like passed right through the solid door. And it came over to the foot of the bed and it came over and it got on top of me. And it was like laying on top of me. And I remember like I was in my body, in my mind, I was like screaming, you know, like I wanted to get up. I wanted to fight. I wanted to jump up. I wanted to yell. I wanted to get the hell out of there, you know, but I could not move no matter what. Like I could not move my body. I remember this being got over top of me and it was doing like, you know, like what you do with the baby, you know, like peekaboo, peekaboo, peekaboo. And it was doing that, but it got over top of me and it was like doing it. But every time it did it, it was like its face got more and more like twisted and dark. Like it was at first, like it was like a very old man, you know, like long cheekbones and pale, like gross, dead looking skin, like the skin of a dead man, you know, scabs and stuff like that on his face and yellow teeth and just gross looking, right? And going like this, and I could see him, and then he would hide his face, and then he would do it again, and the face would get more like ugly each time he did it, you know, to the point where there's like worms coming out of his eyes, and like his hair was like snakes or something, and there was like blood and scabs, and they just like were festering all over his face. And he was like, right. And every time he would do it, it would just get just more and more disgusting. And, you know, he was like laughing, you know, like he would like knew that I was like stuck. Right. And I remember like it went away and like I woke up and it was like, like I flew out, you know, like really fast. And I was like covered in sweat. And I was like, okay, all right, don't do that to me ever again. I believe you. I believe you are who you say you are. I believe you. Like, and that was a really huge shift in my entire worldview in that moment, because like my rational mind could not explain, how is this possible? Like, how is there this continuation of the narrative? And then how could this happen where I'm having sleep paralysis for the first time in my life? My girlfriend's awake next to me, trying to wake me up, seeing the same thing I'm seeing, and she's not having sleep paralysis. And that was the same day I had asked that being to show itself to me. Like when all those things started to happen, like my entire worldview just completely started to shift. You know, I was like, you are dealing with something way above your pay grade right now. You know, like you are in a situation where it was very isolating, even more, because I would, even if I tried to tell anybody, nobody believed me. You know, it was like, if you try and explain this to somebody, they look at you like you're crazy. And especially me having no credibility, being, you know, a criminal and a drug addict and an alcoholic. No, people are like, oh, he's just lost his mind. He's lost his mind. He's a crazy person. So, you know, not to get off topic, but when I see people out on the streets who are homeless and they're talking to people and they're doing stuff like that, I'm like, that person might actually be having more than a mental episode. You know, and we look at them and we don't believe them and because they're crazy, you know, but that person could be very oppressed, you know, and we just treat them like trash. And it's really sad, you know, but it's like, where do you go for help? You know, I didn't believe in any church. I didn't believe in any real God at this point. I had no relationship with God, I should say. And I was so stuck in that life that I couldn't get out. Although I wasn't directly possessed like she was, I was trapped by darkness all the same. I couldn't get out. Even despite all of that, I couldn't just walk away. I stayed in that darkness for a while.
And then there's another group, people who go out hunting for paranormal activity, ghost hunting, investigating haunted spots, and end up making direct contact through seances or other means with what turns out to be demonic entities.
Send that all the way to Red again to confirm you're here. Let's try and... There you go, there you go.
Hold him for a minute then as well. Thank you.
Thank you for doing that for us. Can you tell us if you're alone here?
Vengeful.
Vengeful. I suppose you would be after... Did something traumatic happen in this house? No. Oh.
That's crazy.
Or is it just being clearer?
How weird is that when it speaks? Or when a word comes through, that stops.
It stops.
Yeah, and...
Vengeful. That's interesting. That's going completely flat out now. I'm pretty sure last time I came here this had the most activity in this room as well. Definitely the most activity. The strongest EMFs are in this room. This is probably the best looking room,
Yeah.
Frozen in time room. The rest are all pretty trashed.
And this reminds me of a particular clip from my Zoom session with Father Winston, where he shared how he sometimes gets frustrated with certain Catholics who make it so easy for the devil to attack them.
You have cases, for example, of Catholics that are practicing occult and deep into the occult. And now the devil comes to them and really harasses them. And when they come to you, I always tell this to those that are assisting them. Sometimes there is no compassion in my heart. Because you're angry at these people by their life. I mean, the church is not wanting or lacking in teaching and reminding people of the dangers of certain actions, especially when it comes to the occult, but also in terms of life, their spiritual life, their moral life. And so the devil now comes here and they want to be healed immediately. And you do not have a victim. On my part initially, you don't have a victim here. You have a willing person, really willing person, thinking that the devil does not exist and therefore they continue with their life. So now that the devil is there, they want to be healed. And so when you say, do you get angry? Yes, because you find stubbornness of heart. You find stubbornness of heart, and they want to be healed immediately. They're angry at the church or the priest. For them, it's an emergency. They want immediately to be prayed over, healed, without doing anything. That is the attitude or disposition of going to the shamans, and here in the Philippines, the albularios, the witch doctors, because you just go there and they do the ritual and that's it. But the church does not do that. You need a conversion of heart. You need to see a conversion of heart. That is why it takes time to be healed. But they want to be immediately prayed. And when you ask me, do I get angry? Yes, I do get angry. But where does my conversion start? When you see the person. When you see now the person really being attacked by the devil, then you have compassion. Because you cannot do the ministry without the heart of the good shepherd. It is Jesus who is the good shepherd, and I'm the minister. And the person now in front of me was able to reach this point of being able to see the exorcist and have a schedule for the pray over because God wanted it. It's not to have a schedule, at least in the Archdiocese of Manila, for a pray over. It's not instant. It's not a queue line. You get a queue and next. No, you have a process. And therefore, if the person comes to you, then it means that the person has already undergone all the requirements. And this is now the moment. So at that moment that the person sees you, you are really the minister of the church and the representative of Jesus Christ, the Good Shepherd. And so you must have the heart for the person. So our realization, really, part of my realization in this ministry is that it's not simply the books, the prayers, the sacramentals. The Lord also converts the priest, also converts the people around, so that every member of the team will have compassion compassion on the person and the priest. So that initially you are angry, stubborn. These people are stubborn. Sometimes you have the thought, they deserve it. They deserve to be possessed. They deserve to be suffering because they're stubborn. The church already told them not to, and yet they continue. Now that they're being oppressed. It's the effect, right? It's just like saying, do not smoke, you'll get sick. Do not drink, but then you continue to drink. Then you get sick. It's like it's the same thing, right? So eventually, the conversion that happens is that you become compassionate towards the person. So in that sense, the Lord converted me. The Lord converted the priest or the exorcist. When you sit in the confessional, depending on the status of the priest sitting, you will have moments that you are tired, but you have a ministry, and you sit in the confessional, and then you hear sins, and then you see that the sins could have been prevented had the person just been more vigilant or more serious in their Christian life. And there is the possibility that you have ministers that get angry. I did in the sense that when I was still a young boy, the priest in the confessional would scream at us or get angry with us. So I had that experience, and therefore that turns off people. But then you have to also understand, now that you are behind the confessional and you're the one hearing sins, you get to have these sins could have been avoided had just a little more vigilance on the part, or seriousness, or diligence, and therefore it's possible that you get angry, right? But if one is really always aware to be non-judgmental and say that I am here not as Winston, but I am here as the priest of Jesus Christ, of the church, then therefore I must cleanse myself and prepare myself for all kinds of sins, monstrosity even, if you would like to use the word. Then it's a different experience for the confessor, and it will be a different experience for the penitent as well.
And now, before we get to the end of this video, let's listen to this clip of Father Iannuzzi again on sins. Listen to this.
What is sin? This is what it all comes down to. Many of us have our own understanding of sin, and it's not all the time consistent with church teaching. We all know mortal sin, venial sin. These are both actual sins. Mortal sin cuts us off from the grace of God's divine life, and venial sin does not. We are still in God's grace in venial sin. Both voluntary venial sin and involuntary venial sin do not cut us off from God's grace. So if you're in God's grace, you can receive God's gifts, even if you've committed voluntary venial sin or involuntary venial sin. This is a teaching of the church. You can be in involuntary venial sin and or involuntary venial sin and receive the sacrament of the Eucharist. That's a gift. You can be in voluntary venial sin and involuntary venial sin and receive the sacrament of confirmation, of marriage, of holy orders. But if you receive these sacraments in voluntary mortal sin, voluntary mortal sin, it's a blasphemy, it's a sacrilege, right? You still receive the sacrament, but you're condemning your own soul. As St. Paul says in his letter to the Corinthians, he who unworthily receives the body and blood of Christ incurs his own condemnation. But if you're in voluntary or involuntary venial sin, that's not a sacrilege. You're not cut off from the grace of God. You can still receive the sacraments. You may not be as disposed as you ought to be, but you're not so indisposed that you are barred from them. So the church, in order to dispose you better, has at the beginning of the Mass the penitential act, where you are forgiven of venial sins, voluntary and involuntary venial sins. Now, when you go and confess your sins, whether it's sacramentally to the priest or privately or even during the Mass, at the beginning of the Mass, during the penitential act, we must be mindful of the distinction between contrition and attrition. Attrition takes away venial sin, but it does not take away mortal or grave sin. Contrition alone, which includes attrition, takes away both mortal and venial sin. Contrition is the love of God. Attrition is the fear of hell. How do I know I have the love of God and not just the fear of hell? This is how. By a firm resolution not to commit that sin again. And I mentioned this before, and I'll mention it again. Judas Iscariot, he had attrition. He did not have contrition. Simon Peter had contrition. The fear of hell does not lead to a resolution. The love of God does. And therefore, Judas never asked for forgiveness. He never resolved not to commit that sin again. Instead, he was deceived. He allowed himself to be deceived by Satan and took his own life. He despaired in the grace of God. He sinned against the Holy Spirit, considering his sin greater than God's mercy, being deceived by Satan. But it was the fruit of a lot of his misdeeds during his life. He did not believe in the divinity of Jesus Christ. He was a thief. He took from the common purse. St. John the Evangelist attests to as much. And he knew the value of nothing and the price of everything. Simon Peter, on the other hand, had contrition because not only did he believe that Christ was divine, as is testified to in Matthew chapter 16, but he repented with a resolution. He asked forgiveness. And he made the resolution not to do it again, and he kept faithful to that resolve, to the point of being crucified upside down. The church makes the distinction between, I just mentioned to you, efficacious desire and inefficacious desire. It also makes the distinction between material and formal sin. This applies both to mortal and venial. In the case of venial sin, material sin is the objective act which in and of itself is venially sinful. Sorry, spoke too fast. Material sin, yes, that's correct, is the material act which in and of itself is materially sinful, is objectively sinful, but it does not have the intention to sin. It's not accompanied by our intention to harm God or our neighbor. Formal sin does. Formal sin, formal venial sin, means I intend, I entertain malice, whether it's venial, more or less venial, or whether it's wishing in the inside that something happens to this person, though I don't do anything. These are sins. But material sin is different. Suppose I'm on a cruise line or a ship, right? And I'm going to a shrine, let's say some country, and I go out on the deck, and someone's standing by the rail, a low rail, say it's waist knee high, and I try to approach the edge of the deck to see the water and slip and accidentally hit the person in front of me. They tumble over, fall in the water, and drown. I've committed a material sin, but not a formal sin. The act in and of itself is objectively sinful. I killed somebody, but I didn't intend to. So it's not a formal sin, it's a material sin. In practice, it's no sin at all in God's eyes, but in the eyes of the state, it's involuntary manslaughter. I go to jail. The church doesn't use intentionality all the time. I'm sorry, the state does not use intentionality when it comes to involuntary manslaughter. Only God can read our intention, not the state. But God uses intentionality. And God sees, and we don't, only God sees, another person's intention, whether they're committing a voluntary or involuntary sin, be it mortal or venial. And that is why Jesus says in Scripture, never judge. I'm the one who exacts vengeance. Leave vengeance to me, vengeance is mine. First remove the beam from your own eye before you try to remove it from your brother's.
That will be all for the video this time. And as always, thank you so much for taking the time to be here with us. And hopefully all of you have learned a lot from this video. Remember, if there's any feedback or suggestion, please let us know in the comments below. And until the next one, thanks again for watching and may God bless you.